universities that were turning out software developers, and we were both quite surprised and certainly pleased. So we started a business with just a couple of folks, and now we actually have 70 full-time developers and testers down there. I want you to know that every single person has a degree and speaks English. I will tell you that they have to speak English because Cliff and I, or my partner who's the CEO, we don't speak Spanish. And while that sometimes my wife gets mad when I go down and I'm not good at speaking Spanish, everyone there speaks perfect English, and you'll find conversing with them actually is quite well. So as I said, we started a couple of years ago. We had a tremendous year last year, so the model is actually having lots of success. We grew 300%. As I said, we're in the northern portion of Mexico, so the travel is only an hour flight or less to Phoenix, and then from there we can go obviously anywhere in the country. We do have people traveling to the U.S. at many times, and it's worked out well. Our target market has generally been around software companies and mid-sized companies, those companies that are larger than $100 million. And we found that their need for dedicated teams has been rising as they understand that software is what makes the world go round. I do want you to understand that that is the nature of our business model, is to establish long-term relationships, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. And to do that, we've been using the Agile development process, which is extremely collaborative. Roger talked about it. What we have found is, and why it's so successful, is that it allows the customer and the developer to have daily and constant communication. We use Instant Messenger. We actually use Skype, which is a version of that. And the customer and the developer go back and forth constantly. I do want to give you another quick story. We had a customer just last week, and the developer had sent him a fairly complex spreadsheet just with some different strategies that we were working on, and it had multiple tabs at the bottom. And unfortunately, the developer had saved it on the third tab. And so the customer got the tab and calls me and says, Eric, this is not what I asked for at all. He was very discouraged. Come on, I mean, I told you what I needed. And I didn't really understand why he wasn't seeing it. Well, by the way, he didn't know that there were two tabs to the left. So he really just didn't know they were there. And I'm looking at the first tab, and I see the answer, and he's looking at the third tab and doesn't see the answer. Well, I can assure you, had he offshored this situation, it would have taken 2 to 3 days to figure out that there was a tab, 2 tabs to the left. It wasn't that we had done something wrong. It wasn't that the customer had done something wrong. It was just a classic communication mistake, and it just took us 2 hours to figure out, hey, Jim, have you thought just to move it to the left 2 tabs? He goes, what? I didn't know there were more tabs. So he does that, and all of a sudden, it was amazing. Oh, Eric, thank you. This is exactly what I needed. And we were done. And it took 2 hours. That kind of effectiveness using an agile process, a collaborative process, really, really makes a big difference. And then last, I wanted to know that because of our involvement in Mexico, we have a lot of relationships now with different types of organizations in Mexico, with Sonorasoft, which is an organization there along with the universities, and Mexico government, and we're very, very supported. So what's really neat, that actually translates into not only help from them, support from them in a business perspective, but also helps in our travel. One of the things that we do is we have what is known as TN2 visas. Because Mexico's part of NAFTA, we don't have to get H-1B visas like the rest of the world does. All those restrictions, we don't have any of those. We can get as many TN2 visas as we need. We can have people here for as long as we need them at any given time. So I think you'll find that it's been a very, very successful business model working in Mexico. And I'm seeing from Roger that we've got a couple of questions that have come in that he's finally put together. He's got an answer, and I don't want to delay any further. So I'm going to give you back to Roger, and that's when we'll conclude. Thank you.
Hi, it's Roger again. Back on the Q&A session. I have a question here from our participants. What's the labor pool like in Mexico, in particular relative to software development? So I think Eric started to allude on this. There's been a fair amount of investment in this area by the Mexican government and by the universities and institutions in the area. As a result, we have quite a good supply of .NET and Java programmers coming out of universities. In fact, maybe more of a supply than there is a demand at this point. So at this point, we're not having any problem interviewing, hiring, and finding the skills we need. And by that, I mean we have skills up to 10-plus year skills in these businesses. So at this point, I don't see very much problem. No, not much different than any other place in the world, a good supply, and so on. That's the first question. So what's been your biggest challenge working in Mexico? That's the next question. I think the biggest challenge I've had, which is actually no different than the challenges we have elsewhere, and that is we are trying to build a world-class software development facility, which means we have to make sure that all of our engineers, all of our testers, all of our developers are aware of the state of the practice behaviors that will allow very high capability software development. So we need to train them and develop them in the agile methods, in various technical activities, in being good project managers, being good architects. Again, nothing different than one would have in any starting up any organization. There are no specific issues that in fact, it's a little easier because one can rely upon the power coming out of the wall all the time. One can rely upon water coming out of the spigot, and one can rely upon being able to converse in a language that we can all understand, because I'm not a Spanish speaker either. So I think that's my answer to that. No specific issue, but the same as most of them. Okay, we have another one here. Are staff costs in Mexico on par with those in India or China? Staff costs in Mexico, I think you'll find, are maybe a little higher at that level than the staff costs in India and China. But I think what is helping us here is that the inflation in staff costs in India and China are racing ahead at 11-12% above what they are in the U.S. and our nearshore partners, which is Mexico and maybe Canada. So I think it's not long before the staff costs per se can in fact be more overseas than they are here. I think the question is more complicated than that, in the sense that it's not just the staff costs, it's the on-costs and infrastructure costs that get added to, obviously, the staff costs. I think you'll find in both India and China that they are growing significantly, and therefore make for a much more expensive solution than one may intrinsically see. Okay, are there issues with drug cartels and terrorism? Ooh, this is a good one. Well, I travel down to Mexico mostly every week, not about 3 weeks out of 4. I drive from Phoenix down across the border, and I've been doing that since the beginning of the year when I joined Tiempo. And to this moment, I have not heard the crack of a gunshot. I have not got a bullet hole in my car. I've not actually seen any impact of that in our operation south of the border. I think what most of us are hearing are the stories that are coming out of the border towns in particular, and that is a very particular and peculiar set of behaviors. We don't see those in other parts of the country. You certainly don't see them in Hermosillo. So, I mean, I have no fear, no concern about driving down there. I spend, as I said, 3-4 days a week there, 3 weeks or so a month, and I have had zero contact with anything. As far as we're aware, there's no drug activity at all in Hermosillo or its surrounding areas. So, to my personal experience, it isn't an issue. Okay, does Tiempo use the Scrum processes? Yes, we do. You know, when we talk about the agile method we use, we do focus on Scrum, which is a management practice, and of course we are integrating our Scrum process with some of the technical practices and management practices of a CMMI approach. It is our intent to be able to perform within Scrum and or CMMI up to level 3 by the end of next year. CMMI for next year. We are practicing currently all of our software development activities in Hermosillo today. All the projects are run as sprints that can be as minimum as two weeks, but are generally 3 or 4. That is our standard practice, and that is what we're using. We are bringing in some additional technical practices to support Scrum, because Scrum really only focuses on the management practice of managing sprints, as I said, 2 through 4 weeks. Another question coming here. I am a small software consulting company. What size projects are you targeting? I think Eric had mentioned before, we find the best size of our team is around a minimum of 3 people. I mean, we do have projects that are smaller, but we really find that we can be most effective when the team is around 3. Now, the team of 3 can consist of developers and testers.